Welcome to the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship Community Podcast. I'm your host, Patrice Sage. I am here with Michelle Thompson. Michelle, what does the D stand for?
Doris.
Oh, wow. Doris Michelle. Normally, people put their middle name is the abbreviate, but yours is the reverse. Tell me about that. What's the story there?
Well,
Michelle.
when I became an entrepreneur, actually, I wanted an easy way to introduce myself so people would connect with me and want to build a relationship quickly. And I got tired of having to explain Doris, not Darcy. Different things like that. So I actually prayed about it and said, God, I'm not trying to hide myself because my dad always taught me Doris means queen. But the Lord taught me Michelle means she who's like God. And when I called you to be an entrepreneur, it's to be more like me. So,
Oh, I love it.
yeah,
D. Michelle Thompson, the
yeah.
D stands for Doris. We're going to talk about living victoriously as an individual. This, by the way, all the dad, make sure you're paying attention, the moms as well, because this is not your traditional business podcast today. Because Doris, Doris, see, I get it, that Michelle, D. Michelle is going to help us with parenting. So I was telling Michelle, and I'm going to talk about her in a minute. I was telling Michelle that Michelle is in our coach certification right now. It's on training certification, sorry, and she did an amazing job the other day. And so I was saying, Michelle, promote your book, and I hadn't gotten a copy. So I went to get a copy the other day. I think it was this week or last week, and I thought it was just for women, for girls. So I said, okay, I'm gonna come back and look this further just to see, because I didn't. I mean, um, and then I had to interview on the podcast. So I'm like, okay, I got to read the book. So at least I know what I'm talking about. So I got the book on Kindle. Thank God for Kindle. I love Kindle because you're able to just, get it right away. And as I'm reading the book to kind of go through prepare, I'm like, oh my. As a dad of two daughters, I shouldn't got that book. A 16-year-old and a 20-year-old. As a matter of fact, I'm going to order 2 copies, drop shipping to my girls. And my oldest is like, Daddy, another book. She loves to read, but she said, you know too much. Every so often I send her books. So you've blessed the dad. So for every dad, this is a book that you must read, especially if you got young girls, just to help, and you'll understand why in a minute. The mother as well, but particularly the dad. So let me tell you a bit about Michelle and why she's so amazing, more than just what she's done with this book. So she has an MBA, and she's a 3-time publishing author, and has 20 years, 20, ladies and gentlemen. She doesn't even look 20. Experience as a Fortune 100, leader in advertising and marketing throughout her career. She's worked for top advertising agencies and consumer packaged goods, negotiating $200 million media plans or managing $2 billion marketing budgets. You hear what I said? $2 billion with a B dollars marketing budget for brands like Bounty Paper, Towels, Kellogg's, Nestle, Tropicana. Since June 2009, she's been dedicated to empowering leaders through her firm Destiny Reset, where she believes it is her unique calling to touch the core, the heart and minds of leaders to fulfill their purpose and destiny. This work led Michelle to fit in even when she didn't culturally fit in, as she facilitated sales and marketing training for a room full of Middle Eastern executive in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, realizing everyone has their own belong story. Michelle launched You Belong podcast in October 2019, where she encouraged all leaders to fit in, even when the don't by removing the label titles to freely embrace belonging. So, Michelle, you encourage all of us, even when we don't fit in, whether we are women, whether we are African Americans, whether we are immigrants, whether we are white, right? I mean, because sometimes I've had, some of our white staff, when I travel with them to either Africa or African communities, that's the truth. This is the first time I've been a minority. I didn't know how to feel. So you encourage all of us to belong.
Yeah. Absolutely. I found that every person has that moment in life where they felt like there was a belonging tension. And I believe that's what really unites us and helps us come together versus seeing the differences.
I love it. So today's podcast, and I'll have Michelle come back at different times because she has three books now. Is the third one or fourth one on the way? Which one are
The
you?
fourth is on the way. The fourth
Fourth
is on
is on the way. So I'm going to have her come back. So she also at least 4 interviews, right? Because we can talk about these books. She's a biblical entrepreneur and soon to be biblical entrepreneurship certified trainer. And we're going to focus today on her book, which as a dad, I'm so excited about. Table for One. And you'll understand why she titled it in a minute. Table for One. But Michelle, before we get into your story, how was it being in the Middle East, in the midst of Arab executive, a woman and a black woman at that? Did you have to have your hair covered?
No, I didn't.
Wow. With your hair rolling, how was it being there and conducting training?
It was by far it's like one of the richest experience I've had as a trainer. And what I felt was great is that God used me in the midst of that to help bring even more unity across the leadership team there, even though you would say I didn't belong, because there was a lot of tension in the room because they brought in a consultant and I had to remove the fact that I was a female and a minority and realize the tension was because of what the transformation we were doing, business process transformation, if you're familiar with that, and change man. And so this was a whole new different org development flow than what they were used to working. So I removed all the other reasons why I didn't belong and focused on the main tension in the room. And it became amazing after that. I was able to rework the training in the moment to meet the needs of all the leaders because there were a few yelling matches in there. They were cutting me off. It was high tension, emotion in the room. And some of the people were like, well, it's just our culture. It's just our culture. And I'm like, no, they're kind of mad me being here too. And so I was able to respond in the moment. And I totally, like, the second night I prayed and the Lord had me, I changed the entire training to
Wow.
fit the needs of the 18 people. It's about 18 to 20 people in the room to meet the needs of everyone and make them feel heard and like they belong.
I love it. I've had some Arab friends. When they're passionate, Lord Jesus, they're passionate. So let's go back a little bit, though. That wasn't the first time that you were a black female in an environment of dominating males of a particular culture group. You from your story, you've rose in rank in Fortune 100 companies, and I'm sure that it wasn't like a whole lot of folks that look like you in that environment. Let's talk about that journey. So talk to me about young Michelle and what her dream was, what her hope and desire was, and how she got to where she is today.
Oh, wow. That's a loaded one. Well, I did something unique where I started out like the number one ad agency in the country right after college. Like the day after I graduated, I moved to Chicago from Ohio. So young girl fresh out of Ohio going to the big city, Chicago. And I immediately found out there was these covert little minority networks that you could rely on as kind of your support group, mentor group to go lean on when you needed, even though when you were in the boardroom or different meetings, there was no one that looked like you. And so for me, what happened, I read this book by Lori Beth Jones called Developing Your Mission Statement for Work and Life. And it kind of set the trajectory for me to realize that my work life was just one part of me, that my whole life and my mission was to write and to speak and to teach. So for me, there was always this tension in corporate, like, I know what I'm called to do. I'm only here for a season. So I was constantly asking God permission to pursue this next corporate thing because I was looking for God to give me permission, so to speak, to be an entrepreneur. I felt like I had to do so many things in corporate to prove myself. And so what Holy Spirit did for me was told me, like, I just don't want you to be ashamed. I want you to be an unashamed Christian. So it was about 9/11 time happened, and I was working for one of the top ad agencies again there in Chicago. And I asked the CEO of a global ad agency to give me a boardroom for a corporate prayer once a week. And when I did that, the Lord said, "You're ready." So it was kind of like I was climbing this ladder, but at the same time, the Lord was showing me, I'm just trying to teach you how to live just at work on purpose, regardless if you're in corporate or an entrepreneur. And so once I did that, I felt like I kind of had that permission, but it was still a lot of fear because you're used to that salary and different things like that. But as I navigated it, like, how did I get through it? I've always been a praying woman. When if you read through my books, I'm always talking about the power of prayer. And I remember I had a bad review from one of my first bosses. He told me, if you send me anything, it needs to be ready to go to a CEO. What you sent me last night wasn't ready to go to a CEO. And so now he's the CEO of that company I worked for 20 some years
Wow.
ago. But he taught me a powerful lesson. Even though he was hard on me, he was hard with a lesson that taught me my whole career. He was like, don't ever turn in something that draft. Always turn it in as if the CEO is going to take it. Now, years later, I worked for Procter & Gamble and Bounty Paper Towels, and the marketing plans I wrote got quoted by the CEO.
Wow.
So here it is, the lesson I learned 20 years before he was teaching me. But what he also did is he humbled himself. A year after him telling me don't turn in drafts anymore, he had another new hire crew of college people come in. And I guess they turned in stuff that wasn't even a draft. And they had a lot of questions. And he called me in his office and he apologized to me. He said, I realized I didn't train you. I didn't teach you about what I wanted that would represent. He said, now I realized you figured it out on your own. How did you do that? It was those covert little networks I had of people to go to and ask questions. And then he said, I'm going to promote you. I'm going to recommend you for the next promoter. So I got promoted because some new people started who didn't know as much as I knew a year later. And so that's kind of how I rose to the ranks, just really taking initiative and learning what I could on my own, but always showing my bosses and my leaders that I was their support, that they weren't going to have to do a lot with me, that I was always going to be their right hand.
Young people, if you listen to this podcast, this is the key to success. Satisfy your higher ups faithfully in a godly manner while satisfying your God, and you will rise to rank. Michelle, you make it seem so easy. But let's go back one more. Well, first of all, let me say this. You talk about those covert networks. For many people listening who do not understand the Black experience, or at least the Black professional experience. Mm-hmm. I kind of took the entrepreneur path very early, but a lot of my friends who had the career path, I know how important those professional networks were. So talk about how important this speaks to the importance of community. Mm-hmm. How important are those networks, and does it still happen? Do young Michelles still have those covert network to lean on as they deal with what it means to be African American in the professional world where they feel intimidated by a majority culture?
Absolutely. See, when I started, I'm so old. Yeah, we didn't have ERGs. Now we have employee resource groups and affinity groups. So these are the official networks that were unofficial when I started, of people who were senior leaders who happen to be people of color, who would just send you a call on the voicemail and say, stop by my office at night. And so at night, you're going to these leaders' offices, and they are giving you wisdom and sharing with you how you have to persevere and don't worry about if you're the only voice in the room. I tried to quit my first job, even though I quit after 3.5 years. I tried to quit 3 times. And each time I went into the boss or the senior person of color's office, she's actually a global leader now, she talked me out of it. So the next time I went to quit, I didn't even go to her office because I knew she would talk me out of it. But it was a blessing. It was the right time, because the way I released that job, I got like a 10 or 15 grand increase because I stayed those extra years just from working at a top agency. Just by me walking down the street from the number 1 to the number 4 gave me like a 10 to 15,000 increase.
Wow. We're talking to Michelle Thompson about living victoriously as an individual. You can see her life story is a reflection. She has been living victoriously, but that's not what the title. I want you to. There's a book that we're going to talk about that she wrote that's going to bless you. If you know fathers and mothers who have young girls right now, and even young boys, because I think young boys should read this so they can see the heartache they can bring upon young women. Call them, send this to them, let them watch this so they can understand this book. The book is called Table One. I love the title, and we'll get into it. I had to figure what in the world is Table One. It's called Table One, Please. How to live victoriously as an individual. But Michelle, let's go back one more.
Okay.
I mean, what kind of household produced a Michelle?
A very strict household. A father who was a pastor, a mom who was a Christian ed major, and just really much my dad had his fingerprint on you until you left to go to college. So there were not a lot of options or choices that were free for me. It was kind of, my dad raised me when I was 9 years old. He said, you will date when you have your master's, and you will get married when you have your PhD. So from the time I was 9, it was ingrained in me that I would have a PhD one day. Wow. From the time I was 9, it was ingrained in me that dating and so that's not a big part of who I want you to be. Now, right or wrong, but he put that in me. So while other people were doing, I had father and daughter date nights with my dad through high school. You know, on Fridays, people see me out and I make them think it was a college dude. It was my dad. But yeah, so pretty strict household. Now I'm grateful for it. Back then, it was just like, oh my God, I was writing books all the time and writing in my journals because I didn't have a life.
Wow, what incredible. I know that your dad and mom must be proud today.
Yeah, well, my father died when I was in my senior year of college. So for me, I tell people it was bittersweet because he was such a teacher. He taught Black theology at the university here. He was just a different type of guy. And so he put so much in me and my brother that we honestly have not gone through anything in our adult life where we can't imagine what our Heavenly Father or what our earthly father would say, because he was so much about pouring and making everything we did a life lesson.
Yeah. Now, you talked about your faith. So were you always a Christian? At which point did you make a commitment to the faith? And what led to that?
Actually, it was my father. When my father died, when I was a senior in college, I was always a believer. But as far as a personal relationship, it was when I heard the doctors say they couldn't do anything. I went running to a chapel. Now, mind you, my dad didn't allow us to work when we were in high school. He said, your job is to be a good student. And so what he did allow me to do was work at the hospital that he would later almost die in. So I knew this hospital he was at inside and out. And I remembered the families always prayed in this chapel. So here it was, a girl who was the candy striper volunteer, remembered this chapel when I heard the news about my dad. So I went running for the chapel. I remember falling on my face in the altar and just praying for, I actually shared the words, God, I can't live without my dad. And I literally heard like the Lord saying, I'm your dad, like Darth Vader. Like, what are you doing here? You have given this earthly man way too much credit in your life. And so he extended his life that night, maybe 3 or 4 months, where we got to say goodbye. But that's when I was like sold out, no plan. So
you have any siblings? Tell us about your siblings.
I have an older brother. He is an entrepreneur as well. Business guy. He's more of the finance part of the family than me. But it's been great learning from him as well over the years. And just things that I wish, like as the younger sister, sometimes you have an older sibling. You're like, no, I'm going to do this with my money this way. And then now, like everything he was trying to teach me to do, he was right. But, marketing girl, you like to see things that flash. And he was like, no, dad just died. This is what you do. He was like trying to teach me about legacy wealth and about how you invest. And I was just like, oh, I'm just paying off debt. I just live debt free. And it's like, no, that's not how you live. Yeah.
So you must have been daddy's little girl.
Yes. Yes.
But he didn't spoil you, it seemed. He protected you, or would your brother say different?
My brother would say absolutely different. But what he did is I think I listened to him in a different way that made it seem like I was being spoiled, but it was because I was responding to the rule, to the rules, or you can do this if you do that. So the conditionals I was really responsive to. And so it may appear like I was spoiled, but yeah,
So
I
you
just,
were an obedient daughter in a sense.
yes.
Wow, that's very compliant. Awesome. So let's talk about when you do decide to write. We're gonna talk about your first. This is your first book that we're gonna talk about today. So your
That
first
was
book?
the first one. Yep.
Okay.
That was in my late 20s. I wrote it. I didn't publish it to my 30s.
Ah.
So I wrote it and then it took me almost 10 years to publish it.
So I was expecting a marketplace book. Look at me, right? I had you totally stereotyped, and then I began to read it. So and then when I finally got it, I'm reading it, and it's actually good. Most of the time we don't perceive Christian marketplace as good, writers in the sense of fictional writers, right?
Mhm.
You are good fictional writers. Did you always know that you had that gift in you?
I don't want to sound prideful, but kind of, yeah. I was a young author in my elementary school I grew up in. I was in the Young Authors Club. I was writing books from 6 on up. So I always had stories in writing in my journal, and I would always take life events and say, well, what if this happened instead? And I think for someone who wasn't allowed to go out a lot, that was kind of your adventure, was being able to write these stories.
Well, I can tell. I mean, she is a gifted writer. And so let's talk. So what led to the fact that this will be your first book?
All right. So this book, Table for One, Please, as we call it, and the subtitle is How to Live Victorious as an Individual. I was really led to it after years in corporate America. It actually started from the marketplace. There aren't a lot of minorities in the community I was in Chicago, and a lot of people were delaying marriage and were delaying relationships. And the people who I was meeting in relationships weren't necessarily what God may have called them to His kingdom best. And I'm like, what's going on with this? And so then I had my first prayer partner ever in life from the mega church I attended there, Salem Baptist Church, Chicago. Shout out, y'all. And so what was interesting is my prayer partner was in the middle of a divorce, but she had been diagnosed with lupus and scleroderma, which I didn't understand how terminal those illnesses were at the time. And so what I realized is when we went to pray, she was always praying for healing in her marriage. But as I researched her illness, I'm like, we need to be praying for healing in your body. And so when she passed away, I was very mad at God. And I said, God, why did you allow her to die? And he said, because this is your ministry. And I'm like, to help people die? Because through the journey, I was able to walk with her. And God said, no, to help people live whole and complete. And I went home from her funeral and I wrote that book in a couple days.
Wow.
So
that is incredible. So that incident inspired you to write this book.
Yeah, because I had excerpts to it. I had been jotting down stories all along in corporate America about, wow, women go through a lot where we're trying to balance career and try to have a relationship. And it seems like, especially people of color, have to choose. Either you're going to be this big corporate person or you're going to be about relationship. Because some, and I'm not going to say all, but some men may consider it intimidating. We'll just say that and leave that alone. But so I had written little excerpts out, but after my friend died and I heard like clearly, this is a part of your ministry to help women live whole, to help people live whole. And so I wrote this book, put it to the side for years. And then it was corporate America again. Years later, I was working on a marketing plan for Bounty paper towels and my computer failed. And in the large corporation I worked for, they had no extra computers. And so you borrowed someone else's, and then they sent me home early from work for the day. And if anybody knows corporate America, that does not happen. So they sent me home. And so I said, well, if I can't work on my marketing plan today, maybe it's time to work on church stuff. Because I did a thing for my pastor where I wrote poetry based off his sermon topic. And so I went to work on my home laptop and it wouldn't work.
Wow.
And I began to cry. And I'm like, God, my home laptop won't work. I can't do church. My work laptop won't work. I can't do work. What's going on? And he says, you do everything for everybody else, but nothing for me. I'm like, okay, what? And I said, what are you talking about? And I heard two words, the book. And that was that book I had written when my friend died 10 years earlier. I hadn't done nothing with it like 8 years earlier. So it was at my mother's house on her computer. I went over to my mother's house, got it out, and plotted my way to leave corporate America and publish my book and went on a book tour for a year.
Now, it's interesting because you're back in corporate now. So what happened?
I'm not really back. Well, I met a guy named Chuck Proudfit, and he really taught me about how it's not the either or, but a both and.
Mm.
And I started seeing like this is a part of my cause marketplace. I don't have to just be out here to do it. I can do this from inside the walls as well. So while I'm not full time, I am an entrepreneur with some different companies now and just learning how to live that out, faith at work on purpose.
I love it. So in a sense, you're consulting with these companies essentially. As well.
Mhm.
So let's start with the book. So it's called Table for One, Please. And by the way, if you want to get a copy, visit her website. Actually, let's go give them the direct website for the book. It's called tablefor1.com. Is that correct?
.org.
.org. So tablefor1.org. And it's subtitled How to Live Victoriously as an Individual. And what's interesting about this book is that you build the whole setting, the book, around this idea of a dining table in a sense. It's really clever. But in the introduction, and we'll get to that in a minute, in the introduction, you kind of got me with this prologue where you kind of talk about this this young woman who I'm not gonna give away, but who has an experience with a young gentleman that starts out very well, but then it ends up pretty sad, and that kind of set the stage.
Mm-hmm.
So as a woman, I guess what's the implication there? I mean, why was that important for you to paint that image? And you paint it very graphically. Mm-hmm. I got entangled emotionally. I was like, that's when I said, I got to get this to my daughters.
Yeah, it's actually my friend and editor, Dulcinea Hawksworth out of Illinois. She challenged me. My initial prologue was, as she might say, a little too churchy, or it was too, it lacked emotion. It lacked what she's like, it's supposed to draw people in. And I know you have more story. And I said, well, I'm kind of concerned if people turn off to it, who are, some of the different churches I spoke at or different things. I didn't want them to be turned off. She's like, but this is what people are going through. This is what real experiences happen. So why not be raw? And so she wanted me to pump it up even more. And I was like, no. But I went back to the drawing board, and most people I talked to, they're like, yes, that was it, where I knew this wasn't just any Christian fiction book. Like you were going to deal.
Cheesy Christian. So that's my question. How have Christians responded to it?
It's been great. It's actually the first place I spoke after leaving corporate was Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. I met with the singles pastor there. He loved the concept. Table for One is rooted, for you, those who don't know, in John 17:21. And guess where it took place? At the table, the Last Supper, where Jesus prays for his disciples and future believers that they be one, whole, unity, love. And so what God was showing me through that is that singles, married people alike, all of us have to figure out how to be one with him first. Because when our vertical relationship is right, then our horizontal relationships line up. And so if we can focus on the first thing first, then we can all get along. And so through that, I was really pleased that Lakewood, they had me speak 2 nights. The first night to the young singles and the second night to the singles 40 and above. And I was so nervous the second night because I wasn't 40 yet. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to say to empower 40-year-old singles? Oh my God. And I was like freaking out. And I heard in the bathroom, somebody said, I'm not 40. I came back because I heard her the first night. I'm like, oh my God. So it was like the tension was mounting. It was amazing, but it was well received. And even when I went on, there's something called the National Christian Retailer Association show. I did a circuit like that and did a book tour, radio shows. And I heard my publicist, I thought she was talking about me in a negative way, but it was really a positive. I overheard her introduce me to another Christian show or TV. And she said, she's real now. I just want you to know she's real. And I was like, is she saying I'm too ghetto or I'm too this? So I started internalizing all this stuff. And then I heard other people, it's like, no, you're refreshing. People haven't seen that as someone talk about living for God and do it in such an authentic way that's real. And people are receptive of that. And I'm like, wow, okay.
And that's important. That's kind of what drew me in, because particularly young people these days, I mean, they know when we are packaging the faith, right? Mm-hmm. They want to know the real deal, but in a redemptive way. And, right. and that's what you've done. So, and by the way, as a woman who's rose in her career, very successful, how has it been for you? Has it been intimidating for many men to date a Michelle?
For the wrong one, I hear. For the wrong ones, yes. I have heard this one guy was like, I'm still trying to get my bachelor's. I can't possibly, I've heard all the different things. And I'm like, what? And they're like, that's their own. And so don't even worry about that. But yeah, from what I hear, it has been.
So what do you tell to the men who, by the way, Michelle, are you single, married, dating?
I am single right now today.
You never know when you listen to our podcast. You know what? She's single, gentlemen. We believe in arranged marriages, but call me.
I always say today. I heard somewhere you're supposed to pray. If you're supposed to be married, God will let you know. So today, I am.
There you are. So my question to you then is: so if a young man is watching or listening, and they have that sense of intimidation, what would you tell to men who tend to feel intimidated by an accomplished woman, both degreed and career, and then an entrepreneur? I mean, you've got those three, and then she's a spiritual at that. What would you say to them? What is that they don't understand about women like yourself?
That we have figured out who we are, and that if you're feeling that insecurity, it may be because you don't know who you are. Ooh. And so that is what I would say.
Michelle, you spun some toes. I like it. That is the truth. That is the truth. For me, I've met my wife at 16, and we were friends. We've dated, so I have no clue what that reality is. But I'm thinking, okay, if I'll be scared to be out there today. But you're right. Only if I didn't know who I was, and that's the idea. So you kind of set us up, and I got excited, and then you now go into part one, the glass. So what's the semblance of that? And what can the reader expect to get out of that chapter or that section?
Yeah. So as you alluded to, every chapter is a place setting for setting a table. But what you're really doing is setting a table for the Lord, whether you know it or not. And so each chapter is symbolic of, like, the glass is, are you whole? Like, a lot of times we're trying to look like Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. That and the Joneses, where you should just be trying to be whole, because if you're not whole, you can't keep anything the Lord is trying to put in your life. And so a lot of times we're figuring out, are you half full, half empty, and all these different things. And it's like, no, are you whole? Wow. Because if you're whole, then God can pour into your life the way he wants to, and what you really are needing from other people, you're only going to get from him. So you got to focus on being whole.
Wow. So in essence, you're kind of going back to our main character. I'm assuming that in this, I haven't read this particular section yet, that she deals with becoming whole and the wholeness. But I'm curious, does she get there?
Okay, she gets there. And she gets there through poetry. At the end of each chapter, there's a poem that summarizes how she arrived at the lesson. So at the end of chapter 1, if I'm remembering correctly, it's written so long ago, it's single and whole. Single and whole, no matter what you've been told. The label you've been given is not from above, but from the world below. We're taught not to love. Alone, never truly, with God leading the way. You're single with a purpose. Stay planted. You must not stray. Single and whole, not incomplete. For God ordains two whole singles to meet. Snap. But yeah,
I love it. It's good.
chapter summarizes with what the lesson is, and it's through her prayer journal. So those are really my real poems that I wrote to myself after one heartbreak, not five. So for the book, I wrote 5 different heartbreaks, but those the poems at the end are my real prayer journal of poems to the Lord.
What's interesting is that as you're kind of going through that, I'm kind of thinking about, you know, the kind of what happened to her. And have you had people kind of share the fact that some of the negative circumstances she had to endure, that may encourage young women in that area, knowing that if this happened to you, that things can be good again. Have you heard that at all? And if so, how would you address it?
Absolutely. It's been really an area where I struggled with the first year because I'm like, I'm not a counselor. Because once you open that door, many people feel like they want to confide and share. And I definitely keep a safe place with everyone. But I struggle with it first. Am I equipped to handle all of this? And so through that, I ended up with a contract working with a crisis center for youth and girls. And so I heard stories even beyond that. And what I see now, God was like pricking my heart so that I could know how to be a good listener and show empathy, but not lose it. Because sometimes people will try to be that listening board, but they get so caught up in the emotion of it, they can't really console. And so through that, God has, I believe, anointed me to have that heart to listen with empathy, but still encourage them that this isn't the end. I've done prison ministry for women. It's a crazy statistic out there. 70% or more of women in prison are because of a relationship they had with a man, either a boyfriend, husband, or a father. But because of a bad relationship with a man, got them caught in some criminal activity. It's statistics, it's not me. But me being able to hear some of their stories, I was prepared for that in doing this book.
It's funny you say that. I never had statistics to back it up. But I've always said a broken woman is because of a father, a grandfather, a brother, a boyfriend, an uncle, or a husband.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you see it repeated over and over again. That is incredible. And then from the glass, you take us to the knife. Mm-hmm. So I want to know. So what does the knife got to do with her journey?
So as all of us, and it's a continuous thing, what I don't want to do, and that's what I've been encouraging groups now, is you never really arrive. Like wholeness is a journey. We're always on that path to be more and more in the image of Christ, more and more like him and whole. But the knife is what we all need at the table. And each of these, I forgot to mention, are rooted in a scripture. So the knife is rooted in 2 Corinthians 10:15, casting down imaginations, every high thing that tries to exalt itself above the knowledge of God. And so when I speak at churches, most of the time they ask me to speak on the knife for a ministry, to talk about cutting the substitutes and waiting on God. And so that could be anything in life. And I have married people who come in and now they're like, wow, what are my substitutes? I had my pastor auntie, I spoke at her church, and she was like, I think my substitute is doing a bunch of ministry. But it causes everybody to think like, what am I putting out there to try and substitute or fill this void, this wholeness, this crack, this whatever in my life? And so a lot of times it could be a relationship, it could be shopping, it could be whatever. But I have people to go introspect and really think about what are substitutes in your life that are keeping you from being whole. You got to cut them.
I think of circumcision, cutting away the bad stuff. Is that kind of where you were going at? Ooh, Michelle, that's painful.
Yeah.
It does hurt. And then you get into the fork. Tell us about the fork.
Just real quick, it's rooted in 2 Timothy. We're talking about study to show yourself approved. Fork, I think about you want to eat and be nutritious. And so I started thinking about what are you meditating on? What are you eating? What are you feeding yourself? You want to live this way, but you can't live that way and walk this way at the same time, or with this group of friends, or with this type of thing on your internet, or whatever that might be. So really encouraging people. I'm getting conviction even as I speak this. So it's a convicting message. Like, what are you nurturing yourself with? What are you eating to prepare yourself?
Ooh, that is so good. As you were talking about the internet and so forth, one of the dangers of things like the internet is this whole flesh of the eye, the lust of the eye, right?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly as men, I'm not sure if it affects women the same way. As you're browsing, the double tick.
Mm-hmm.
And what the Lord showed me early is that, because we knew what we saw, right? You know what you saw, but somehow overcoming that temptation to say, did I really see that? And really, that's that internal drive, right? And so when it's just an interesting thing. So when somebody's saying to us, you know what, minimize the double takes, be true to yourself, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
This could heal some pastors and some ministers, and so I mean, this is good stuff. So you have one coming around for the men. Is it kind of a healing journey for men as well, or is it dealing with how men should be treating the ladies? What's the angle?
Yeah, it's similar to Table for One, Please. It's called Table for One, Thanks. Got it right here. And so I promised God that when I did this book, I would not choose anything. I got a crew of men that they wrote the male character storyline. They gave me the inspiration. If I wrote a love thing, they had to see what that really happened. And they picked the cover. They didn't like all the frilly purple on the first book. So for this book, it was like, just give me a chair. It's Table for One. And one of my male friends, I call him my spiritual brother, he calls it Table for One, Thanks. Because we have a joke that women say, please, will you do this, please? And men are always expecting something to be done or thankful somebody did something. And they go, thanks. And so that's why we said Table for One, Please for the women, Table for One, Thanks for the men. And eventually the vision is, as you shared, that the Table for One journey would go on and show all aspects of life of how everyone has a journey to be one, whole, and complete in God. And so for the male journey, they really show what I tell women in the book. I believe in the opening of this, I said, this will heal you from every man that broke your heart. You're going to know he had a broken heart too at some point.
Wow.
And then I say, this is, I said, at some point in life, God had to show me men were my ministry. Get it? Ministry, M-E-N, ministry. And that every man that comes into your life is not your potential mate. It's your friend, it's your brother in Christ first. And to really try to respect and honor that and not go to, could we be married? Could we be this? This is just somebody God chose at this point in season in your life to interact and intersect with you. So go ahead.
It's actually say that because, I have two girls, and one of the challenges with young girls is they're fast. I mean, not that my girls, none of my girls are fast, but they kind of are, meaning that, so you hear them talk about things with their girlfriends and so on. These are teenagers. And they're so much more mature than the young boys. And their thinking is like, they're scaring these young boys. So talk a little bit about that in terms of this idea that these teenage girls, and I guess that they're at the end when the young boy, he doesn't even know what it means to have a girlfriend.
Exactly. And it is hard, and it's all ages. It's what's funny is I'll have a week where I could do a group with a teenage group, a 40+ group, and I'll hear the same thread going through it, that the women are more ahead or thinking through what could be and all that. And the guy's like, I just really wanted to go eat. And she looked cute. They're just kind of like, that was it. I wasn't thinking a month from now. I wasn't even thinking about the other girl's number I got 2 hours earlier. I was just thinking she was cute. Whereas one of my male friends told me, he taught me this, which blew my mind. His phone, he didn't know was on. And he had just told me, I think you could be my wife or whatever like that. And then 2 days later, I said, well, I have to pray about that, because I was like super spiritual then, like, I don't take any attention. I got to pray about that. So a few days later, he butt dialed me, and I heard him talking to another lady. And so after that, I just blocked and didn't talk to him again. And so years later now, we're talking, we're friends. And I said, do you know why I never called you again, or I never took your call again? He goes, no, why? I said, because you butt dialed me a few days after you said you thought I was your wife. He says, let me tell you something about men. He says, when I said that to you, I did think that, but that does not mean no one else was in. I was like, oh my God. But he kept it 100, as they say, with me.
I love it. I love it. This is why I want my daughters to get your book. But I have a couples in business group that we meet once a month. Is this a good book for couples in business to go through? I'm just thinking.
I'm just laughing. No, perhaps. I had a married woman who's been married for, I want to say, almost 45 years. When she read my book, and her and another lady been married 65 years. They love it. And I had to interview them because I heard their kids tell me, and I'm like, what's going on? Why are you in love with this book? Because it's really talking. She says, no, it's talking about my relationship with God. It reminded me that I hadn't fasted since before I got married.
Wow.
When I became a wife and a mom, everything just became so consumed. I stopped having my table for one.
Wow.
I was just so blessed because it was like I couldn't believe it. And then I talked to the other woman who's been married forever, and she was funny. She came to my like slumber party night in Chicago and she's an older. It was so funny, and she's been married forever. But she said it's about God. It's about my relationship with God that I've got to keep it first. So
what's interesting, Michelle? Either you're real humble, you have no clue how good this book is. I mean, you kind of shocked at the comments and people's response. You're like, oh, really? I mean, so you really have no clue of the impact of this book.
Yeah, I do sometimes, maybe. I think it's been so long for me. This was the first one. Mm-hmm. And so, but what was encouraging to me, because at first, when I first left corporate, I thought I was just a writer, speaker. So I didn't do any consulting. And I was just writing books. And on some of my lowest days, I would get emails from people out the blue who were like, this book saved me, or this helped me. Like, wow. Like, I didn't know this little book would do that much.
So is this one of those songs that you're kind of tired of singing? You're trying to get us to sing the new songs?
A little bit.
Yeah. But the song is good. So then you went to the plate. Tell us about the plate.
The plate is rooted in Proverbs, where it talks about as a man's heart reflects the man, and just like water reflects a man's face, so does the heart reflect the man. And so I think about an empty plate, in that as you get a table for one with God, the closer you get to God, it's not so much about what you want anymore, putting stuff on your plate. It's about you taking off the plate because you want to see the reflection of God. And I always think about my mom's good china. When I was growing up, we only ate on china for the holidays. And when you shined it real nice, it was a reflection. And so I kept thinking about that so much. When I did my book tour, I took my mom's china to all the churches. I would hold it up and show how it's a good reflection of your heart and where you are in God. And so that's what it does, the table for one.
So for our listeners and viewers and myself, by the time it gets to the plate, is her reflection good?
Yes, her reflection is really good, really good. She's outreach. What I don't like to do is, well, I'll go on and give the ending. I don't allow the character to get married. And everybody's like, is that because you're not married? and it was because I felt like, and no slight against the Small C church or anything, but I felt like the church sometimes are faith-based. We sell people, quote unquote, a formula as if it's going to fix something. Mm-hmm. And what I was not doing was a formula to fix a problem of being single to become married. I was trying to show people just a journey to get closer to Christ.
You remind me of Tyler Perry there. No. No. But it's right. You're trying to show real life. And you're right. Us as Christian, we want that formula, right? We want that happy ending. We want that predictability, but we don't learn from it. Mm-hmm. It is the rituals we memorize. Mm-hmm. We need the hard pill. Yeah. But she's cleaning Tyler Perry. So it's just for the record. So then you conclude with the spoon.
Okay. Do you like dessert, Patrice?
Oh my, do I? Look at me.
I was hoping you didn't mess it up for me. I love dessert. And so my dessert is that scripture, Psalm 37:4, delight thyself in the Lord and you get the desires of your heart. Or as I tell people, you get dessert. And so with that is the spoon. And so when I travel and speak, I try to get a spoon for everyone in the audience with that scripture hanging from it to remind them as you get closer to God, you're getting the desires, but because you look more like him, the desires may not be marriage anymore. Like the closer I got to him, my desire was to give his message out. It was to be who he called me to be. It wasn't so much that third finger ring, it was to be who he called me to be. And so, what I write in the book, I don't allow the character to get married, but there's a guy in the book that you feel like they are equally like this should be her husband. The second book, you find out why he wasn't ready to propose. So, the second book
What a
builds.
setup.
So,
So when
yeah.
you come back, we got to talk about the second book.
Yeah, and what I learned from a lot of the men in my life that, they teach me a lot. Love my brothers.
That is incredible. Wow. Talking to D. Michelle Thompson, Living Victoriously as an Individual. Table One, Please. A book that, fictional books that really does a great job of portraying the journey of a young woman who faces some trials and tests and how she overcomes it and becomes victorious. I'm going to get it for my daughters, and I hope you can get it for yours as well. As I prepare to close, before I do, I got a few questions for you, Michelle. The first question is I can listen to this statement to you. I think you're going to do more than just books. I see media in you, because the way you captured my imagination and the authenticity and the calmness by which you project this, keep it up because we need redemptive stories.
Amen.
Right. As a Black man, I enjoy Black movies. I really do. But unfortunately, and I also enjoy as a Christian movies. But unfortunately, then they're not. This is a generalization. Black movies are not always redemptive, right? And we need to redeem that culture. But Christian stories are not always. It can be cheesy at times. There have been some exceptions recently. I can see you taking that to another level. And so please, as the Lord speaks to you and open doors for you, go in it boldly because you got it, girl.
Amen. Thank you.
And so let me do a little commercial, and I'm going to have Michelle. Before I do, actually, Michelle, you also learned to be a certified trainer. We've known each other for a long time, but we kind of getting close as a community recently. How is it being backed with BE and Nehemiah Project? It has been experience being for you as a certified trainer.
It has been awesome. I told Patrice the first day, I was just kicking myself like, what took me so long to go through this? Because I knew it matched my heartbeat and for what I was called to do, but it was just about timing, I guess. And so for me, it's been great. It's just been a push for me. It's challenged me. I love being in a classroom of great leaders and other trainers. I feel like we all learn from each other, and it's just iron sharpen iron. I love it. I really love it.
As you're saying that, there's another trainer, she's actually a training coach named Lorna out of Kenya. I want to connect you with Lorna. Would you do me a favor? Could you guys reach out to each other? Because you guys, there's a similarity about both of you, right? There's just a similarity. She is the dynamo just as you are. So I'm going to do that connection with you and Lorna. And she's a gift, and I think you are as well. But so, Michelle, before we close, I want you to share some words of encouragement to our people. Before we do, though, let me do a little commercial. If you want to thank you, Deborah. If you want to know more about Michelle and get a copy of the book, Table One, put it up again, Michelle, please. Table One, please. Visit her website at table41.org, table41.org. She has other resources there. She's also a speaker, a consultant, and an entrepreneur. You can know more about her by visiting her website. Also, if you enjoy this podcast and you know women, individuals who have struggled in this area, who can be encouraged by Michelle's story, why don't you forward this podcast to them? Put it on your Facebook page, tweet it, whatever you can do, so that you know what, if it touched you, it will touch somebody else as well. Don't hold it to just yourself. Push it out so that others might be blessed, and definitely get Michelle's book. So, but if you want to know how we can work with you to become an entrepreneur or to grow your existing business so that you can grow up to be like Michelle, visit our website, nehemiahecommunity.com, nehemiahecommunity.com. There you can learn about our training program, biblical entrepreneurship, identity and destiny, serve with love. You can learn about our coaching program, how we can come alongside you and coach you in growing your company. You can learn about our access to capital, how as you grow your business, should you need capital, we can come alongside you, connect with our investors, or do direct investing into your business. You can also learn how to join the community. We have over 1,000 entrepreneurs from Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, North America, who are all committed to building kingdom companies. Membership does have its advantages. Come on, join us so that together we can transform the world. With that said, Michelle, so 2020 was a tough year for many people, particularly for entrepreneurs. Some shut down, period. Some made a decision to launch January 1, 2020. And that was interesting timing. Many are nervous about 2021, wondering will this year be similar? Could you speak to them? What encouragement would you give them as they seek to live victoriously in 2021?
I would definitely have to, I think of the Psalm scripture, why thou downcast, O my soul, hope thou in God. To really have hope. Cling to your hope in this season. Remind yourself of who put that in you, and that God will be the one to perform that. He will complete and finish and perfect that concerning your life. To really cling to that hope.
Wow. Thank you for that encouragement. By the way, don't forget we are celebrating the first year anniversary of Women in Business. There's a link there if you want to register and be a part, join in, so that you can learn how we are empowering women entrepreneurs around the world and hear from great speakers. Michelle, you are the best. You're better than I thought. I am telling you. Whatever my expectation was, you blew out of the water. We appreciate it.
Okay.
If you want to know more about Michelle, visit her website, table41.org, table41.org. With that said, let me pray for you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord enable you to steward those talents that are under your care, as Michelle has. She's been able to publish, be an entrepreneur, have a career in corporate, just live out the fullness of her potential. And may the Lord enable you to do it in such a way that one day you will hear those wonderful words. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. Guess what? He'll not make you rule over much. God bless you. Thanks for listening and watching. Michelle, you have to come back.
All right. Thank you. Be blessed.